Hey there, friends! This is Laz, the undying man. He can't die at all. Well, he can, but he always comes back. Don't believe me, eh? Have a gander at this, pal. How you like them apples, baby boy? Today we will be playing RimWorld as Laz, and every time we die, we will be starting completely fresh in a new universe, world, and even a new mod list. For example, if Laz here is an Imperial Marine serving the great Emperor Napoleon alongside a battalion of clones, but dies during the war, then he may very well end up being an ancient samurai in feudal Japan. Now, real quick before we begin though, because of the way I do my titles in each series, it may be a bit hard for you to keep track of which series this is. So that's why if you see Laz here in the thumbnail, you'll know that this video is part of the series. Also, the mod list is always going to be in the video description of each video. Now, shall we begin? I believe we shall, and as you can see here, Laz is a pretty gentleman who's pretty good at most things except for intellectual, social, artistic, and construction. He also doesn't have any health issues like missing limbs, scars, or any diseases as for now, although I think scars, missing limbs, and things like that may very well carry over into the next mod list and world when he dies. Let me know what you guys think about that though. In this world and universe, Laz was a soldier who was over agriculture and grew up as a cave child, thus why he has some great survival skills. And thus why collecting wood for any campfires or construction needs, as well as being able to mine quite well, comes so natural to him. Survival skills are quite crucial on a planet like this, where the dominating force seems to be pirates, bandits, and looters, and the Empire is indeed shattered and hardly a government at all. Laz, exhausted from his day's work, would collect some berries outside and eat them before going beddy-bye. He'll need to get plenty of rest because in the morning we have a lot of work to do. We would begin by digging out some compacted machinery so that we could get components, and then we would begin deconstructing some steel structures. You probably already know where I'm going with this, but I'm afraid I'm a silly gooberhead and I completely forgot that the construction skill of Laz is piss poor, and thus he cannot make a wood-fired generator or any type of power generator. We would begin constructing some proper furniture, some torches for light, and also a campfire so that we may begin cooking all the berries that we're collecting into a proper meal. With that work completed, we would then begin focusing on smoothing the floors and the walls of our little makeshift cave shelter here. All the while, all of this work was helping us significantly increase our construction skill. Later into the night, we would end up having two visitors from a nearby mercenary settlement. One of them in particular, by the name of Anarchist, had a very beautiful pistol that we were interested in, but unfortunately, we were a little bit of a poor boy, so we'll just stick to smoothing our walls. They were, however, kind enough to leave us a little bit of medicine. We would then utilize some of the wood that we had harvested to make a bow and arrow. Now this is going to be perfect for defending ourselves as well as hunting some small game like rabbits to eat. After all of our work from smoothing walls and floors, we finally got our construction skill up to a 4 and we were able to build a wood-fired generator and a proper light shortly thereafter. But power generation was far from our only concern. Our main priority now was going to be defenses, something that I cheaped out on and I should have been working on already. I ended up building some walls, some barricades, and also some wooden spike barriers. We would also build a small wooden shack for all of our storage needs. Slowly but surely this place was becoming quite the cozy little abode, but it wouldn't do us any good if we started starving to death in winter, and that's why the next day we built a very small field and started planting some rice so we could get a head start. Being on a planet that's dominated by mercenaries and pirates, I was also a bit concerned about our safety, so I ended up building some wooden armor and a backpack for our carrying needs. Feeling safer already. I sure hope we are actually safer though. It looks like we have our very first raid. Something tells me our wooden armor won't fare very well against bullets, but I guess we're about to find out. After the pirate entered our camp, something of a shootout had begun. Arrows and bullets whizzing back and forth over the campfire. Occasionally we were getting lucky with a shot or two, but as was the pirate. We began to make a retreat away from our walls. To make matters worse, it would appear that Laz here has lost his right eye. I don't think we'll be hitting much of anything now. There would be no time for us to try to flee the area though, as the pirate was coming right for us, and yet another shootout would end up beginning just outside our walls. Well, that's not good. It would seem with that one final shot, Laz lost his brain. Or at least the part that kept him alive. You know, in hindsight, perhaps a stone mask or even something simple like that to try and protect his head would have been good. Try not to be angry with me, okay? This happens more often than you would think, and normally I have to restart the series, but in this case, it can continue on even after he's shot in the head, so, you know, kind of a good thing. Kinda. At the very least, we're back alive, in a totally different world, but still alive. It would appear that we're in some type of Japanese-centric culture here on this planet, and upon further inspection, this does indeed appear to be the case for the most part. Even so, with many different types of samurai factions as well as tribal factions, it would also appear that there are some space junkers here as well. Should be an interesting blend of technologies. Just a bit ironic that my example earlier was a feudal Japan, and now we're actually in a Japanese kind of playstyle. I should also mention that every time I die, I'm going to be using a randomizer to choose new mods to be added to the mod list for the new world and universe. There's also a chance that it will be completely re-rolled into a completely new mod list as well. In this new world, we quickly threw together yet another wooden house with a decorative roof as well as a new campfire, essentially placing us right back where we were in terms of progress in the other world before we died. Luckily, we hadn't got very far, except we did have power over there, but it won't be long. Interestingly as well, I noticed that even after being resurrected, Laz has a giant gaping hole in his chest, although it's not actually affecting him negatively. Something else that's very interesting is a few years back I tried this exact same prototype series, though it was much less refined, and after resurrecting Laz several times, he was actually completely rotting, so that might happen this time too. It also might not though. We began planting more rice, as even this planet seems to have a winter month as well, so we don't want to starve to death, and then we would begin mining some copper out of some nearby hills. We decided that we would utilize this copper for some weapons. Even though it is much softer than steel, it's also much more abundant here. Look, I'm gonna level with you. Sure, in that first world, before we died, we weren't ready at all for the first raid, and we got our shit rocked, but that's not going to be the case this time. If we need to, we'll get up close and personal. We had some visitors stop in that night, but we were fast asleep. They ended up leaving us 91 silver as a gift. The folks of this world seem to be pretty kind. We also had some starship chunks that didn't burn up when they fell from orbit, and we deconstructed those for some resources. Utilizing those resources, we would also end up building ourselves a small wood-fired generator. That way we could at least keep some lights on around the base and inside our home. But I was beginning to feel like we were going to be caught off guard with our first raid here as well, so I decided to begin working on defenses, some large walls, and this time around I began putting some traps in the middle instead of some wooden spikes. Not to worry though, we were still sure to give Laz a nice snack break here and there. Early one morning though, as dawn began to break, we were cutting trees by the small pond when I noticed there was someone skulking around the small hills of the base. It would seem that an enemy samurai has detected our little humble abode. While this was bound to happen sooner or later, the gentleman would try to approach us with his katana in hand as we fired off arrows at him. We had eventually tricked him into the hallways of our walls, where he would then try to come out and hit a trap. Ah, you poor dumb fool, we wouldn't make the same mistake twice. We would, however, begin tending to his wounds before we took him back to our very own home where he would be imprisoned. We would also begin recruitment attempts, of course, as it would be nice to have another helping hand. But we really liked our home, so we would end up building the prisoner a place of his own to sleep. He seemed to really like it here as well. It sure as shit beats sleeping outside. I also wanted to mention the reason I had chosen him is because he had a pretty decent skill set and he was quite steadfast, and thus he was well worth it. Besides, even though Laz has indeed accomplished quite a bit of work here in the last few days since he has arrived on this planet, in this body, in this universe, it would still help out quite a bit if we had some other people with us. Especially in cases where we're getting attacked by the space mercenaries and pirates that are on the planet as well, it would come in handy if we're not the only one fighting them. After all, traps can only take us so far. In the meantime, we would be doing a lot of work like as you saw there in those clips, building a new storage house as well as deconstructing some old ruins, and best of all, adding some more defenses in with another wall to the western section of our base. These two locations, the opening to the west and the opening to the north, were the most vulnerable spots to us, and thus it was quite vital that we actually put some choke points in. For all of his hard work these last few weeks though, Laz would celebrate with a singular brewski by the fire. A job well done, my friend, you have earned it. After some time, he had also finally convinced Black Toad, our would-be samurai murderer, to join us here. After a bit of discussion between the two of them, they decided that this place and our faction needed a name, so we went with the Lazaranians. I know, not very catchy and a bit corny, but even more lackluster, we ended up naming this settlement Flowing Hills. But maybe it'll sound cooler when I tell you the reason we named it Flowing Hills is because of the lava flowing off the nearby mountains. No, not better? Okay, sorry. In the days to come, a small child would enter our camp begging for 37 pieces of silver so that she may buy the freedom of her older sister. Her sister had been enslaved by the space pirates of the planet. If somehow we had enough forces, maybe we could go and try to liberate these slaves, but for the time being, I'm afraid we can only donate our money. We can only pray that it's not in vain, and also pray that that child didn't just rip us off with a story. Either way, we still had ourselves to worry about for the time being, so we ended up planting a decent-sized field of corn to help us better prepare for winter, but we also needed to expand our knowledge of different technologies if we'd ever hope to make it out of the slums of these hills, so we ended up building a small shack for research, and we would start with the Bushido Code. This technology will help us out with some new types of apparel, a shield, as well as weaponry. Plus, given the fact that Black Toad here is somewhat familiar with his planet's culture, it shouldn't take all that long. While he was researching the code, we ended up having a man-hunting pack of raccoons enter the area, but they were hardly any concern. Well, except what we should pair them with for dinner, that is. Some time later though, and Toad had finally finished up his extensive research into the Bushido Code, and we are now beginning to learn the way of the samurai. With this prerequisite out of the way, we would also begin research on Ashigaru armor and helmets. However, with that being said, the creation of said armor and helmets will be a little bit longer, as we still need to do smithing as well. So in the meantime, we would begin working on a grand hall next to this small pond where we can have nice meals together, have little soirees, and cook all in the same room. However, it was also around about this time I was getting a bit sick of the decorative roofs. I couldn't find one that would really fit this type of building. There's only some for 5x5, 7x7s, and 13x13 structures, and I really don't like the large white squares when you hide the roof, so I got rid of them all. Besides, it would hardly make sense for little places like this in our nooks and crannies where we end up building a roof over some columns for something like a storage depot, and then we have a full-on decorative roof right next to it. Either way, we'll get this place looking pretty good by adding in some natural pathing as well as stone flooring that really complement our ancient style technology. Plus, some nice looking homes and feasting halls are all we needed for some teamwork motivation. However, the peace couldn't last forever, as we now have yet another raid. This time around though, it would seem to be the space pirates. One singular mercenary rifleman, it would seem, is all that's came. Interestingly enough though, upon further inspection, she and her cohorts appear to have adopted the cultural styles into their advanced armor and weapons. Make no mistake though, the armor may indeed look ancient, but it is damn near bulletproof, which is quite a shame as we only have arrows. Perhaps if we could weaken it with our traps though. She managed to tank all 3 of the traps, but luckily the second one or so ended up making her drop her rifle. We rushed in to try and pick it up. Looks like our chances of survival just increased tenfold. Using this bad boy would end up winning the battle for us. If she hadn't have dropped her rifle though, we would have had damn near no chance of winning this thing. Her armor sure is powerful for her to still be alive. I think we'll take that for ourselves. We would also begin tending to the wounds of the space mercenary so that we may try to recruit her. Luckily, she's not unwaveringly loyal to her home faction, as you might expect given her profession. Now, I'll be the first to admit, in the beginning of this new world, I was quite skeptical at just how well we would fare here. But my, we are really coming along, aren't we? And we look damn good doing it as well. Laz, the one-eyed samurai. Speaking of faring well and thriving in our environment, we ended up building a small log home for Laz since the prisoner is currently housing in his, and we would also build a blacksmithy. It was during this time as well that we had noticed a volcanic eruption filling the sky with soot. Given the biome, I expect that this will be a common occurrence. With our blacksmith shop and our forge finally set up though, we would be able to utilize some of the steel that we've been mining into some proper attire and armor for Toad. Just a couple of dapper lads hanging and banging. Ha 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 ha. Okay. Anyway though, we began focusing on our defenses a bit more with some upgrades like some wooden embrasures in our walls, allowing us to shoot out at any enemies. But that's not all. We would also bring in the heavy artillery with some very large cannons just on the inside of our walls, just in case the shit really hits the fan. We would also end up building some wind turbines just for a more consistent source of power. And then I ended up spotting, this creature. It appears to be a large beaver with an organic terrarium growing out of its back. It would seem that this mod list and the creatures on this planet are a little bit stranger than we initially thought. And quite frankly, I love it. However, something I do not love are the two enemy samurai coming to flay the flesh from our bones. We would prefer to keep the flesh where it is, so we're going to try to stop them in their tracks before they even make it inside. Unfortunately, I had forgotten to move the stone chunks in front of our embrasures, which would give the enemy ample cover. Luckily though, our traps would take out one of them. And if you're pretty good at math, you'll know that that means there's only one of them left, so we would try to rush him with our katana, and he died pretty easily actually. Our defenses seem to be working pretty darn well. Now with the threat neutralized, how about a little bit more work on some research? We're going to be researching clockwork. For us, this will end up unlocking many a new item that is based on basic steam tech technology as well as basic clockwork technology. And it's also a prerequisite technology that needs to be completed before we can research steam power, which will help us harness, well, the power of steam, as you might imagine. Now all this talk about steampunk and clockwork and all these other different types of technologies are going to need some unique metals like zinc and tin and copper. That way we can use them to make an alloy known as bronze and brass. That's right, baby, the Rat Daddy knows a thing or two about metallurgy. As we were working on mining some of these metals, we would end up recruiting the Rough, which is the samurai that initially attacked us, from the Space Mercenaries. I'd be lying if I said I trusted her completely already, so she would have to try and earn our trust by doing some work around the colony, such as hauling all those metals and all of the corn that we've managed to harvest and grow. Speaking of which, after this very first harvest of our corn, we were actually quite ready for a rough winter if one were to ensue. But avert your eyes, my friends, for we are once again being raided. This time around, it would seem to be a small group of Neanderthal tribespeople. And that is not a diss at their intelligence. No, quite frankly, they are literal Neanderthals, meaning that they are pretty dumb, but they're also very tough. We'll have to aim true with our bows and with our rifle if we ever hope to defeat them swiftly. For these Neanderthals have the tough skin and the muscle density of a damn alligator. As you can see here, this one easily tanked 3 of our spike traps. Laz was coming down from his little mining trip and ended up engaging in melee combat with one. This was not a great idea on my part, and I was playing a little bit too fast and loose. Oopsie daisy. Luckily though, Laz was still alive, and our other 2 companions would be able to subdue the Neanderthals. A shame that we ended up killing them, as I'd like to have taken one as a prisoner and made them into a tough little recruit for us. Nonetheless though, we would end up tending to Laz and putting out all the fires that the Neanderthals had started. After much time and much tending, it would seem that Laz isn't going to be going to a new planet, a new mod list anytime soon, thankfully. A short bit of time later, and Black Toad had finally finished up his extensive research into clockwork, unlocking all the secrets of that technology for us. One of which that I had a particular interest in was the clockwork exoskeleton. Would I like some steampunk power armor? Yes sir, I think I would. I was also very interested in the steampunk prosthetics that we would be able to unlock with future technologies as well. This might very well be our best bet at replacing Laz's eye. In the meantime, while we're working on other types of technology, I thought it might be useful useful for us to have a prison up and ready to go just in case we have any other Neanderthals or enemy samurai that need to be recruited. We would also build a separate room onto our hull for food storage. Now this might not seem like too much of an interesting change, but there is a big difference here. I've actually added a door so that the temperatures are going to be differing here, and an embrasure onto the food storage room. That way in wintertime the food will be frozen and thus will not expire. And now a little bit ago I was a little bit perplexed when talking about the clockwork technologies, as I thought I had to do more research before I could build any of the production areas like an alloy furnace, which we would end up building, and a clockwork bench, which we would also end up building. Well, after smelting many a bronze and brass ingot that is, but even after creating both of these new production areas, there still wasn't all that much we could make until we get some more research out of the way, so it's still a little ways off. Sorry. Not to worry though, a steampunk samurai is still within the very near future and well within our grasp. Now, as this episode is winding down to an end, I wanted to get some suggestions on names from you guys for the Rogue and Black Toad. I think in this series I would like to have you guys be the ones to name our pawns instead of sticking with their names that are generated by the game, especially since, you know, we'll probably end up dying again at some point. But my friends, we have built a quaint and cozy, well-protected little village here nestled in between these hills. I look forward to seeing how you guys feel about it, your suggestions, and also how you feel about this series. I think we're off to a pretty good start, minus the part where I basically immediately died early on, but we won't talk about that. And I truly do look forward to surviving here, thriving here, and growing here. And hopefully our death in this world is only due to old age. Ah, son of a bitch. Well, I'm gonna level with you here. This doesn't look too good for us. I suppose we'll find out in the next episode. Hello, I just want to pop in here at the end of the video and kind of talk to you guys about this series and my plans for this series and what I want to do and, you know, just stuff like that, I suppose. This series, as I briefly touched on earlier, is actually based on a previous series that I done maybe 2 or 3 years ago when the channel was still relatively new and I was still very, very small, of course. That was called RimWorld Infinite Lives. You can actually go back and see that playlist. I don't know if you'd want to watch it. The audio wasn't great, and the idea was very, very unrefined. I think back then, every time I died, I just resurrected the character, which was fun for me, but eventually became quite boring because there was really no stakes. And that's why I think I like the idea of this one a lot better, but of course, I would like to get the ideas and feedback of you guys for different things we could add to the series. For example, if you guys would like, something that I also kind of touched on early on in the video is when we die, if we're going to keep, you know, our body parts. Say, for example, Lazarus has lost his eye in this one, and he ends up getting a steampunk eye. What if that mod isn't there anymore when we move on? Or should we just leave the mod in? Should we leave the eye, or should we take it out? To me, personally, I feel like we would, you know, leave the eye out, and he's just kind of, you know, eyeless, but of course that could end up with him being a torso on the ground that can't move at some point, and we just keep on starving to death. You know, so that's kind of my thoughts with that, but let me know what you guys think, if that would be something you'd like to see, or what other kind of conditions would you like to put on this series. And I won't take up too much of your time anymore, but real quick, I do want to explain what I want this series to be. It's going to be very fun because we'll play with different mod lists whenever we die and stuff like that to keep it fresh, but also I want this to be something of a back burner series, and what that, you know, I guess what I mean by that is something of a staple on the channel where I'll work on it when I can, and I'll play it when I can. If we don't have any current projects that are going on, like any new series, like the Gun Empire series and stuff like that, then this would be the main focus, of course, right? So something that's always there. Even when we're working on other main projects, we would also be working on this on the back, you know, in the background, that kind of thing too. That way it's always going on, and, you know, I mean, essentially with this series idea, it could be indefinite. You know, we could keep on going and going and going with it. So not only would it be a constant series that we just never end, but it would also be a constant source of entertainment for you guys that stays fresh as we die and continue to update stuff. So that's kind of what I want, and that's what I want this to be and stuff like that. So I just wanted to explain that to you in case you have any confusion as to where this came from and why I'm wanting to even do this series. But truly, my friends, I do hope you have enjoyed. I love you guys, and I will see you next time. Goodbye.